I'm Geneva, 57 years old, and I never thought my own daughter would betray me like this. Last Tuesday, Stephanie called with shocking news. "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house. Be ready by 9. My whole body went cold. The home my late husband Frank and I had built together, where we raised our children and stored 35 years of memories, sold without my knowledge or consent. What Stephanie didn't realize was that her plan had one fatal flaw. A secret her father and I had arranged years ago that would turn her scheme upside down. I'd love to know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you love, hit that like button and subscribe to Hear How I Turned the Tables When My Own Daughter Tried to Steal My Home. The beach house wasn't just any property, it was the physical manifestation of Frank's and my lifelong dream. We purchased it in 1988, when property along the California coast was expensive, but not the astronomical investment it is today. Frank worked as an aerospace engineer, and I was a high school art teacher. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were careful with our money and knew exactly what we wanted. The house itself is modest by today's beachfront standards. A 2-story, 3-bedroom craftsman with weathered cedar shingles that have turned a beautiful silver gray from decades of salt air. What makes it special is its location perched on a small bluff overlooking a quiet cove, with steps leading down to a stretch of beach that's practically private since it's difficult to access from public areas. The living room has floor-to-ceiling windows that frame the Pacific Ocean like a living painting. Every sunset feels like a personal gift. When we first toured the house, it was in disrepair. The previous owner was an elderly widow who hadn't been able to maintain it properly for years. The real estate agent kept pointing out all the flaws, probably hoping to lower our offer. But Frank and I exchanged glances. We could see beyond the peeling paint and creaky floorboards to what the house could become. "This is where our kids will grow up," Frank whispered to me as we stood on the deck listening to the waves crash below. "This is where we'll grow old together." We purchased the house for just under $300,000, which stretched our finances to the absolute limit. For the first few years, we could only afford to fix the essential problems: a leaking roof, faulty wiring, plumbing issues. Every weekend became a renovation project, with Frank teaching himself carpentry, plumbing, and electrical work from library books. This was before YouTube tutorials, and Frank was always hands-on, believing that hiring contractors was an unnecessary expense when he had 2 good hands and a determined mind. I remember those early years with such fondness, the house gradually transforming around us, becoming more beautiful with each completed project. I'd paint murals in the kids' bedrooms while Frank installed new cabinetry in the kitchen. We'd fall into bed exhausted each night, our clothes speckled with paint or sawdust, but deeply satisfied. Stephanie was born a year after we moved in, and her brother Tyler followed 3 years later. The sound of children's laughter became as much a part of the house as the creaking of the old wooden floors or the distant rhythm of the waves. The beach became their playground, the tide pools, their science class, the vast horizon, their first lesson in the infinite. Frank built a treehouse in the massive oak that stands at the edge of our property. He installed a tire swing that dangles over the side of the bluff, giving the kids the thrilling sensation of swinging out over the ocean. For their 10th birthdays, each child got to choose a room in the house to redesign however they wanted. Stephanie chose the small bedroom that faces the ocean, painting it a deep turquoise with silver stars on the ceiling. Tyler converted the garden shed into a science lab where he conducted his endless experiments. As the children grew, so did the value of our home. The quiet beach town gradually transformed into an exclusive coastal community. Houses around us were purchased, demolished, and replaced with mansions 3 times their original size. Developers would occasionally leave notes in our mailbox offering to buy our property for sums that seemed outrageous to us. Frank would read these offers aloud at dinner, and we'd all laugh at the absurdity of it. "Why would we sell?" he'd say. "What could possibly be worth more than this?" And he'd gesture toward the view, toward the memories embedded in every corner of our home, toward the family gathered around the table. The money was meaningless compared to what we had built here. Frank was always the practical one in our relationship. While I taught art and dreamed in colors and textures, he calculated and planned. He established college funds for the kids, maintained our retirement accounts, and kept detailed records of every home improvement project, tracking how each one increased the property's value. But he never saw the house as an investment to cash in on. It was our legacy, the place our grandchildren would someday visit for summer vacations. Then 10 years ago, everything changed. Frank had gone for his morning run along the beach, something he'd done nearly every day for 30 years. He made it back to the house, climbed the steps from the beach, and collapsed on our deck from a massive heart attack. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. Just like that, at 62, the love of my life, my partner in everything, was taken from me. The weeks and months after Frank's death are still a blur in my memory. Tyler, who was 24 at the time, moved back home temporarily to help me navigate the practical aspects of sudden widowhood. Stephanie, then 27 and already living in San Francisco with her boyfriend Marcus, came down for the funeral but returned to her life quickly afterward, calling occasionally to check in. I found comfort in the house itself. In the walls, Frank had painted the garden, he had tended the deck, where he'd spent countless evenings, watching the sunset with a glass of wine in hand. I could feel his presence everywhere, not in a ghostly sense, but in the craftsmanship and care he had put into our home. Selling it never crossed my mind. This was where we had planned to grow old together. I would fulfill that part of the dream for both of us. Over the years, both children built their own lives. Tyler became a marine biologist, eventually accepting a position at a research facility in Australia. Despite the distance, he called weekly and visited at least once a year, often bringing colleagues to show them the remarkable tide pools he'd studied as a child. His connection to the house remained strong, filled with appreciation for the childhood it had given him. Stephanie's relationship with her childhood home was more complicated. After Frank's death, her visits became increasingly infrequent, and when she did come, she seemed restless, as if the house and its memories made her uncomfortable. She pursued a career in marketing, climbing the corporate ladder with single-minded determination. She married Marcus, who had transitioned from her boyfriend to a successful real estate broker, specializing in luxury properties. It was during one of their rare visits about 5 years after Frank's death that I first noticed something concerning. While I was preparing dinner, I overheard Marcus in the living room not admiring the view as most guests did, but discussing the property's potential with Stephanie. "The lot alone has to be worth $4 million, he said in a low voice that carried through the open floor plan. "With the right architect, you could build something truly spectacular here, double the square footage, at an infinity pool extending toward the ocean. Properties like this don't come on the market often." "Mom would never sell," Stephanie replied. "You know how sentimental she is about this place." "She can't manage it forever," Marcus said. "It's a lot of upkeep for a woman her age. At some point, it makes sense to cash out, move somewhere more manageable." I stood frozen in the kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, as they continued discussing my home, as if it were merely an investment opportunity waiting to be unlocked. That evening was the first time I felt a fundamental disconnect between my values and my daughter's. Where I saw a home filled with irreplaceable memories, she saw an underutilized asset. That conversation marked the beginning of a subtle campaign. On subsequent visits, Stephanie would point out maintenance issues: loose shingles, the aging water heater, the cracks in the concrete steps leading down to the beach. "Mom, this place is becoming a money pit," she'd say with feigned concern. "Wouldn't it be easier to sell and move into a nice condo with no maintenance worries?" I always responded the same way. This is my home, Stephanie. A few repair bills are a small price to pay for living in a place I love. When Tyler visited, he took a different approach, rolling up his sleeves to help with repairs or hiring local contractors for jobs he couldn't handle himself. Dad would want us to take care of the place, but he'd say, understanding completely why I chose to stay. 3 years ago, during Tyler's annual visit, he shared a concern that had been weighing on him. We were sitting on the deck after dinner watching the stars emerge over the ocean when he broached the subject carefully. "Mom, has Stephanie talked to you about selling the house?" he asked. "She mentions it occasionally," I admitted. "I've made it clear I'm not interested." Tyler nodded slowly, his expression troubled. "Marcus has been asking me a lot of questions about the property, the deed, whether Dad left a will. It feels calculated." A chill ran through me, despite the mild evening. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not sure," Tyler said. "But I think you should be careful. Marcus is in real estate. He knows how valuable this property has become. Just don't sign anything without talking to me first. Okay?" I dismissed his concerns at the time, unable to believe my own daughter would try to force my hand on something so important. But Tyler's warning lingered in my mind, especially when a few months later, I returned home from grocery shopping to find a strange car in my driveway. A woman in a business suit was taking photos of the exterior of my house. When I confronted her, she explained she was an appraiser, working for a client interested in similar properties in the area. She apologized for the intrusion and left quickly. That evening I called Stephanie, described the incident, and asked if she knew anything about it. Her hesitation before denying any involvement was telling. A week later, I received a call from a neighbor who lived further down the beach. He mentioned that someone had been asking questions about my property, specifically whether I had ever discussed selling. The pieces were starting to form a disturbing pattern. When I confronted Stephanie during her next visit, she became defensive, then tearful, claiming she was only trying to help me plan for the future. "You're getting older, Mom," she said. "This house is too much for you to manage alone. I worry about you out here." "I'm 54, not 84, I reminded her. "And I'm perfectly capable of deciding when and if I want to move." The tension between us grew. Our phone calls became less frequent and more strained. Stephanie's visits dwindled to major holidays only, and even then she and Marcus would stay at a hotel rather than in the house, claiming it was more comfortable. Meanwhile, Tyler continued to call faithfully each week. During one conversation after I shared my growing concerns about Stephanie's interest in the house, he suggested something that seemed unnecessary at the time. "Mom, it might be a good idea to talk to a lawyer about protecting the house," he said, "just to make sure everything is properly documented in case anything happens." "You think your sister would try to sell the house out from under me?" I asked. The idea still seemed unthinkable despite the mounting evidence. "I hope not," Tyler said. "But Dad always taught us to plan for all contingencies. Remember." I did remember. It was one of Frank's favorite sayings. Hope for the best, plan for all contingencies. The engineer in him was always anticipating potential problems and designing solutions before they arose. It was what made him excellent at his job and a wonderful provider for our family. So I took Tyler's advice and consulted David Cohen, the attorney who had handled Frank's estate after his death. David had been a friend of Frank's since college, and I trusted his judgment implicitly. When I explained the situation, he wasn't nearly as surprised as I expected. "It's unfortunately common," he said, "especially with valuable properties like yours. Children sometimes see their parents' homes as part of their inheritance, rather than their parents' ongoing residence." "What can I do?" I asked. David suggested the several options, including placing the house in a trust with specific provisions about its use and eventual disposition. As we talked through the details, I realized that Frank, with his characteristic foresight, had already anticipated this potential issue years ago. What David helped me understand that day would later become my salvation when Stephanie finally made her move. I still remember exactly where I was when Stephanie called that Tuesday afternoon. I was in Frank's old office, which I'd converted into a painting studio after his death, working on a seascape. Late afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating the canvas with a golden glow. When my phone rang and I saw Stephanie's name, I felt a small surge of hope. Our conversations had been so infrequent lately that any call felt like a potential olive branch. "Mom," she said without preamble, her voice businesslike in a way that immediately set me on edge. "We're going tomorrow. I've sold your beach house. Be ready by 9. For a moment, I couldn't process the words. They were so outlandish, so completely unexpected, that my mind simply couldn't make sense of them. "What did you say?" I asked, certain I had misheard. "The house, Mom. I've found a buyer. They're offering $4.2 million all cash. It's an incredible deal. Marcus says properties in your area rarely go for that much." The paintbrush slipped from my fingers, leaving a streak of blue across the wooden floor. "You sold my house without telling me, without my permission. It's for the best." Stephanie continued, her tone maddeningly calm and reasonable. "You can't maintain this place anymore. Just last month you were complaining about the cost of fixing the deck stairs." "Complaining about repair costs isn't the same as wanting to sell my home." My voice had risen, shock giving way to anger. "Stephanie, you can't sell property you don't own. This house belongs to me." There was a pause. Then Stephanie spoke with exaggerated patience, as if explaining something to a child. "Actually, Mom, after Dad died, the house transferred to both Tyler and me as part of the inheritance. I've already spoken to Tyler, and he agrees this is the right move." The lie was so blatant that it momentarily left me speechless. I knew exactly what had happened after Frank's death, because I had handled the estate with David Cohen, personally. And I had spoken to Tyler just 2 days earlier. He had mentioned nothing about selling the house. "That's not true," I finally managed. "You know that's not true." "Mom, I have the paperwork right here," Stephanie countered smoothly. "The point is, it's done. The buyers are eager to close quickly. They're planning to demolish in the spring and start building their dream home. Marcus has already found a lovely assisted living facility near us in San Francisco. You'll have your own apartment, but with staff available whenever you need help." Assisted living. I echoed, my mind reeling. "I don't need assisted living. I'm perfectly capable of caring for myself." "We all need help sometimes," Stephanie said with manufactured sympathy. "And this way, you'll be close to us. We can visit often." "You barely visit me now," I pointed out. She ignored this. "We'll be there at 9 tomorrow to help you pack your essentials. The buyers are allowing you 30 days to clear out personal items, but they want possession immediately." "Stephanie, listen to me." I fought to keep my voice steady. "You cannot sell this house. You do not have the legal right to do so." "We can discuss the details tomorrow," she said dismissively. "I need to go now. Remember, be ready at 9. And then she hung up, leaving me standing in my studio phone in hand, feeling as though the floor had dropped away beneath my feet. My first call was to Tyler in Australia. Despite the time difference, it was early morning the next day for him. He answered immediately, his voice thick with sleep. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Did you agree to sell the house?" I asked without greeting, needing to hear his answer directly. "What? No, of course not." He was fully awake now, confusion evident in his voice. "What's going on?" I relayed my conversation with Stephanie, each word making the situation seem more surreal. As I spoke, Tyler's confusion gave way to outrage. "She's lying," he said flatly when I finished. I haven't spoken to her in weeks, and I would never agree to sell the house without discussing it with you first. She can't do this, Mom. She seems to think she can, I said. She claims to have paperwork showing the house transferred to you both after your father died. Tyler was silent for a moment. That's impossible. Dad made sure. Wait, she doesn't know, does she? Know what? I asked, although I was beginning to suspect what he meant. About the trust, Tyler said. About the provisions Dad made before he died. No, I confirmed. She never showed any interest in the estate planning we did. She skipped the meeting with David after the funeral, remember? Said she was too grief-stricken to handle paperwork. Call David right away, Tyler advised. Make sure everything is in order legally. I'm going to try to get a flight home, but it might take a day or two. You don't need to do that, I protested. You have work responsibilities. This is more important, Tyler interrupted firmly. That's our family home, and no one's going to take it from you, especially not my own sister. After hanging up with Tyler, I immediately called David Cohen. Despite the late hour, he answered, and his response to my situation was immediate and reassuring. They have no legal standing, he stated categorically after hearing my story. None whatsoever. Any contract Stephanie has signed to sell the house is worthless. She said she has paperwork showing the house transferred to her and Tyler, I said. She's either lying or has falsified documents, David replied. The house was never in Frank's name alone, so it didn't pass through his estate. You owned it jointly with the right of survivorship. After his death, you placed it in the family trust we established with yourself as the primary beneficiary and Tyler as trustee. Stephanie has no legal authority over the property whatsoever. The relief that flooded through me was tempered by sadness. My own daughter had attempted to sell my home out from under me, going so far as to lie about having the legal right to do so. What had happened to the little girl who once painted her bedroom turquoise to match the ocean, who had cried when a storm damaged her father's carefully built treehouse? How had she become someone who could dismiss her family's history so callously? What should I do when she arrives tomorrow? I asked David. Don't sign anything, he advised. Don't agree to anything verbally. In fact, I think I should be present. What time did she say they're coming? 9 in the morning. I'll be there at 8:30, David promised. And Geneva, try not to worry. Legally, you're completely protected. Frank made sure of that. As I hung up, I felt a wave of gratitude for my late husband's foresight. Even after his death, he was still protecting our home and our dreams. I went to the bedroom window and looked out at the ocean silver in the moonlight, drawing strength from the constancy of the waves. You were right, Frank, I whispered to the night air. You always said to plan for all contingencies. The next morning I brewed a pot of coffee and set out 3 cups on the kitchen table. I wasn't offering hospitality out of politeness. I wanted Stephanie and Marcus to sit down to have this conversation, like adults, instead of them swooping in to cart me away like an inconvenient piece of furniture. David arrived precisely at 8:30, briefcase in hand, his silver hair neatly combed, wearing a suit that made him look every inch the successful attorney he was. We reviewed our strategy over coffee, his calm confidence bolstering my resolve. Let them speak first, he advised. Let's hear exactly what they're claiming before we respond. At 9 o'clock sharp, a sleek black SUV pulled into my driveway, followed by a moving truck. My heart sank at the sight of the truck. They had really expected to pack up my life today to dismantle my home without so much as a proper conversation. Stephanie entered without knocking Marcus a half step behind her. My daughter was dressed for business in a tailored pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look older than her 37 years. Marcus, ever the real estate professional, wore a crisp button-down shirt and designer jeans, an artificial smile plastered across his handsome face. Neither seemed surprised to see David at the table, though Stephanie's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mom," she greeted me with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "Mr. Cohen, I didn't expect to see you here. I thought it would be helpful to have David present, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Coffee. We don't really have time, Marcus interjected smoothly. The movers are on the clock, and we have a lot to accomplish today. He glanced around the living room with appraising eyes. You should know, Geneva, we've negotiated for the buyers to purchase some of the larger furniture items. The dining table, the bedroom sets, the living room sofa. They're willing to pay an additional $30,000 for those pieces. That's very thoughtful, I said, but my furniture isn't for sale either. Stephanie let out an exasperated sigh. Mom, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. The sale is happening. Fighting it only makes the transition harder on everyone. Why don't we all sit down? David suggested, his tone pleasant but authoritative. I think there's some confusion that needs to be cleared up. Reluctantly, Stephanie and Marcus took seats at the kitchen table. Marcus immediately pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table with a flourish. I have the purchase agreement right here, he said. $4.2 million, all cash 30-day escrow. The buyers have waived inspection contingencies and are prepared to close immediately. It's an exceptional offer, Geneva, well above market value. And who exactly are the sellers named in this agreement? David asked, reaching for the document. Marcus hesitated, glancing at Stephanie. She leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. Mom, after Dad died, the house transferred to Tyler and me as part of the estate. I know you may not remember all the details from that difficult time, but I have copies of the relevant documents. She reached for her own folder. We've held off on selling out of consideration for your feelings, but Tyler and I agree that it's becoming impractical for you to remain here. The maintenance, the isolation, the stairs to the beach that become more dangerous every year. I let her continue watching as she laid out her fictitious narrative with such conviction that I almost wondered if she believed it herself. When she finally paused for breath, I asked a simple question. Have you actually spoken to Tyler about this? Stephanie didn't quite meet my eyes. Tyler understands that this is the practical solution. He's so far away in Australia he can't help with your care or the house maintenance. That's not what I asked, I pressed. Have you personally discussed selling this house with your brother? We've discussed your living situation many times. Stephanie evaded. David cleared his throat. I think we should address the legal situation directly, he said. Stephanie, the documents you're referring to don't exist. After Frank's death, this house was never part of his estate because it was jointly owned with Geneva with right of survivorship. It transferred directly to her ownership. Marcus frowned, looking at Stephanie. You said the property was inherited through the estate. David continued before she could respond. Furthermore, in 2016, Geneva placed this property in a family trust with herself as the primary beneficiary during her lifetime, and Tyler as the trustee. The trust has specific provisions about the disposition of the property, none of which allow for its sale without Geneva's express consent while she's living. Stephanie's face had gone pale. That's not possible, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Dad would have told me about something that important. You were invited to the estate planning meetings, I reminded her gently. You chose not to attend. Marcus was rapidly flipping through his folder, his confident demeanor crumbling. There must be some mistake, he muttered. Our title search didn't show a trust. Because you didn't do a proper title search, David said. Had you done so, you would have found that the property is held in the Turner Family Trust, not in Geneva's name personally. Any agreement you've signed to sell this property is invalid. You have no legal right to sell what you don't own. The silence that followed was deafening. Stephanie stared at the table, her knuckles white where her hands remained clasped. Marcus pulled out his phone and stepped away from the table, presumably to call someone about this unexpected development. When he returned, his face was grim. The buyers are going to be furious, he said to Stephanie. We'll be lucky if they don't sue for misrepresentation. Sue us. Stephanie's voice rose in panic. This is your fault. You told me the title was clear. You told me you had checked with your brother, Marcus shot back. You said he had agreed to the sale. Their unified front was crumbling rapidly, revealing the cracks in both their relationship and their scheme. I watched with a mixture of vindication and sadness as they turned on each other. I need to speak with the buyers, Marcus said, heading for the door. Maybe I can salvage something from this disaster. As the door slammed behind him, Stephanie and I were left facing each other across the table, David, a silent presence beside me. The daughter I had raised who had once collected seashells along our private beach and helped her father plant the garden that still flourished outside, now looked like a stranger to me. Why? I asked simply. Why would you do this? Stephanie's composure finally broke. You don't understand the pressure we're under, she said, her voice cracking. Marcus made some bad investments. We're drowning in debt. The commission from this sale would have solved everything. So you decided to sell my home without even discussing it with me? You never would have agreed, she said bitterly. This house means more to you than your own daughter. The accusation stung, but I recognized it for what it was, a deflection of her own guilt. This house is my home, Stephanie. The home your father and I built together. The home where you grew up. It's not just a financial asset to be liquidated when you need cash. It's just a house, she insisted. Just wood and glass. We could have used that money to solve real problems. Your financial problems are not my responsibility, I said firmly, and they certainly don't justify what you tried to do here. The sound of tires on gravel announced Marcus's return. He stormed back into the kitchen, face flushed with anger. The buyers are threatening legal action, he announced. They want compensation for the time and resources they've wasted. This could ruin us, Stephanie. I think it's time for you both to leave, David said, standing. I'll be in touch regarding any legal matters that arise from this situation. Stephanie looked at me pleadingly. Mom, you have to help us. We're talking about potential lawsuits, professional repercussions for Marcus. All for a house you'll eventually have to sell anyway. I felt a surge of anger at her continued manipulation. No, Stephanie. I don't have to help you out of a situation you created by trying to steal my home. I think David's right. You should go now. As they gathered their things, the reality of their failed scheme setting in, I added one last thing. And Stephanie Tyler is flying in from Australia. He'll be here tomorrow. Unlike you, he actually did call me before making decisions about my life. The look of shock on her face as she realized her brother had never been complicit in her plan was the last thing I saw before the door closed behind them. As the moving truck and SUV pulled out of my driveway, David placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. You did well, Geneva, he said. Frank would be proud. I nodded, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. The victory felt hollow. I had kept my home, but possibly lost my daughter in the process. The days following Stephanie and Marcus's failed attempt to sell my house were eerily quiet. The phone didn't ring. No apologetic text messages appeared. It was as if my daughter had simply erased me from her life after her scheme failed. While part of me was relieved to be free from the immediate drama, a deeper part ached with the pain that only a parent estranged from their child can truly understand. Tyler arrived the next day exhausted from nearly 30 hours of travel, but determined to be by my side. As I embraced my son in the same entryway where his sister had tried to uproot me just 24 hours earlier, the contrast between my children had never been more stark. I spoke to David on my way from the airport, Tyler said, as we sat at the kitchen table, mugs of tea warming our hands. He filled me in on what happened. I still can't believe Stephanie would go this far. Neither can I admitted. She's always been ambitious, materialistic even, but this This feels like crossing a line I didn't know existed. Tyler's expression darkened. It's Marcus. He's been pushing her in this direction for years. Every time I talk to her, she sounds less like herself and more like his echo. She mentioned they're in financial trouble, I said. Bad investments, she said. Tyler nodded grimly. It's worse than that. I've been doing some digging since your call. Marcus's real estate business is on the verge of collapse. He made some highly leveraged investments in commercial properties that tanked during the pandemic. They've remortgaged their house twice already. How do you know all this? I have a friend who works in finance in San Francisco, Tyler explained. He's been hearing rumors about Marcus for months. Apparently, he's been taking increasingly desperate risks, borrowing from less reputable sources to cover his losses. I absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with the confident, successful image Marcus and Stephanie had always projected. Their luxury cars, expensive clothes, lavish vacations, all potentially funded by mounting debt rather than actual success. So selling this house was what their financial Hail Mary, I asked. $4 million would have solved a lot of problems, Tyler confirmed. Paid off debts, restored Marcus's professional reputation, maintained their lifestyle. At my expense, I said quietly. Tyler reached across the table and squeezed my hand. But they didn't succeed, Mom, thanks to you and Dad thinking ahead. The mention of Frank brought tears to my eyes. Your father always said to plan for contingencies. I never imagined the contingency would be our own daughter trying to sell our home out from under me. Dad was wise about many things, Tyler said, but I don't think even he could have predicted this specific scenario. Over the next few days, Tyler and I fell into a comfortable routine. He worked remotely from Frank's old office, calling into his research lab for daily updates. In the evenings, we cooked together and sat on the deck talking about everything and nothing. The betrayal still hung in the air, but Tyler's presence was a balm for my wounded heart. A week after the confrontation, David called with news. The potential buyers had filed a complaint against Marcus's real estate firm, claiming misrepresentation and demanding compensation for their time and legal fees. It's not your problem, David assured me, but you should know that this could have significant professional consequences for Marcus. Real estate boards take this kind of thing very seriously. Later that day, the first text message from Stephanie appeared on my phone. The buyers are suing Marcus. His broker is threatening to revoke his license. We need help. I showed the message to Tyler, who shook his head in disbelief. Still making her problems your responsibility, he muttered. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said firmly. She made this mess. She needs to handle the consequences. 2 days later, another message. Marcus might face disciplinary action. Please call me. I didn't respond to that one either, though the mother in me wanted to reach out to comfort my child, even as the rational part of me recognized that this wasn't a skinned knee I could kiss better. This was an adult who had tried to commit what amounted to elder abuse, who had lied and manipulated and shown no genuine remorse. On the 10th day after the failed sale, my phone rang. Stephanie's name flashed on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Mom? Her voice was small, nothing like the confident, dismissive tone she'd used during our last interaction. Can we talk? I'm listening. I said, neither welcoming nor rejecting her overture. Not on the phone, she said. In person, just you and me. No Marcus. I considered her request. Part of me wanted to refuse to protect myself from further manipulation, but a larger part, the part that would always be her mother regardless of what had transpired between us, couldn't turn her away. When? I asked. Tomorrow, around noon, I can drive down from the city. All right, I agreed. Tomorrow at noon. Tyler was concerned when I told him about the planned meeting. Do you want me to be here? He offered. For support. I shook my head. I think this needs to be between Stephanie and me. Whatever happens next, we need to have an honest conversation, just the two of us. The next day, Stephanie arrived punctually at noon. She looked different than she had during the attempted house sale, less polished, more vulnerable. Her hair hung loose around her face, and she wore jeans and a simple sweater rather than her usual designer outfits. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights. We sat in the living room, the ocean spread out before us through the windows Frank had installed decades ago. For a while, neither of us spoke the rhythmic sound of waves filling the silence. "I've left Marcus," Stephanie finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Of all the things I had expected her to say, this wasn't one of them. "When?" I asked. "3 days ago," she replied, "after his broker suspended his license pending investigation." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. Despite everything, I took no joy in my daughter's pain. "Don't be," Stephanie said with a bitter laugh. "It's been a long time coming. This was just the final straw." She looked around the living room, her eyes lingering on family photos, on the driftwood sculpture her father had created on the watercolor of the cove I had painted years ago. "He lied to me, Mom, about everything. The business, our finances, even this house." "What do you mean?" "He told me he had checked the property records," she explained. "He said the house had transferred to Tyler and me after Dad died, but that you had life tenancy rights. He said the sale could proceed legally with my signature as co-owner, and that you would have no choice but to accept it." She shook her head, shame evident in her expression. "I should have verified it myself. I should have talked to Tyler directly instead of assuming he'd agree. I should have done a lot of things differently." "Yes," I agreed, not willing to absolve her completely. "You should have. The thing is," she continued, "Marcus made it sound so reasonable, like we were doing you a favor moving you closer to us, relieving you of the burden of this big old house." She met my eyes directly for the first time. "But that was never the real reason. We needed the money desperately. Marcus has been lying about our finances for years, taking bigger and bigger risks, borrowing from people you don't want to owe money to." "Tyler mentioned he'd heard rumors," I said. Stephanie nodded. "It's all true. Worse than the rumors, probably. I've spent the last 3 days going through our accounts, talking to banks, meeting with a lawyer. It's a disaster, Mom. We're millions in debt. The house in San Francisco is underwater. Marcus's investment properties are all failing. He even borrowed against my retirement account without telling me." "Oh, Stephanie," I sighed. Though her actions had been inexcusable, I could see how she had been manipulated, how financial desperation had pushed her to betray her own values. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy," she said quickly. "I don't deserve it. I'm telling you because I need you to understand why I did what I did. Not to excuse it, but so you know I wasn't just being callous or greedy." She took a deep breath. "I was scared. And I let that fear override everything Dad ever taught us about integrity, about family." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for trying to take your home, for lying, for treating you like you were incapable of making your own decisions. It was unforgivable." "It was," I agreed softly, "but that doesn't mean it can't be forgiven." Stephanie looked up, hope flickering across her tear-streaked face. "Really? Forgiveness doesn't happen overnight," I cautioned. "Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But you're my daughter. Nothing changes that." She nodded, accepting this qualified olive branch. "I don't know what I'm going to do next," she admitted. "The legal issues with the fake house sale, the divorce, the debts. It's overwhelming." "One step at a time," I advised. "That's what your father would say." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "He would, wouldn't he? Along with plan for all contingencies." "He was wise that way," I said. "Wiser than I appreciated at the time." We talked for hours more openly than we had in years. Stephanie explained how her marriage had gradually deteriorated, how Marcus's charm had masked controlling tendencies, how she had lost herself, trying to maintain the perfect image he demanded. I shared my own struggles with aging, with maintaining the house alone, with balancing independence and loneliness. As afternoon faded into evening, Stephanie asked hesitantly, "Would it be okay if I stayed here tonight? I've been living in a hotel since I left Marcus and I need a break from everything." "Your room is still your room," I told her. "It always has been." That night, I called Tyler to update him on Stephanie's visit. He was cautiously optimistic about this turn of events. "She sounds genuinely remorseful," he said. "But actions speak louder than words, Mom. Let's see what she does next." "She's staying here tonight," I told him. "In her old room." Tyler was silent for a moment. "Just be careful, okay? Don't sign anything. Don't agree to any financial arrangements." "I won't," I promised. "But I think this is real, Tyler. She's left Marcus. She's facing the consequences of her actions. That's a start." "A start," he agreed. "Just remember that rebuilding trust takes time." I ended the call with a renewed appreciation for my son's protective instincts and practical wisdom, traits he had inherited directly from his father. As I prepared for bed that night, I paused at Stephanie's door, hearing the soft sounds of crying from within. The mother in me wanted to go to her to comfort her, as I had when she was small. The wiser part of me recognized that these were necessary tears, part of the process of recognizing and atoning for her mistakes. Instead, I continued to my own room, standing at the window to watch the moonlight dancing on the waves. "I wish you were here, Frank," I whispered to the night. "You'd know exactly what to do." But as I gazed at the eternal rhythm of the ocean, I realized that perhaps I did know what to do after all. Take it one day at a time. Offer forgiveness without forgetting the lesson. Create space for healing without abandoning boundaries. It's what Frank would have done. It's what he would have wanted for our family. The month that followed Stephanie's return was a period of cautious rebuilding. She initially planned to stay only a few days, but as the legal and financial complications of her separation from Marcus mounted, those days stretched into weeks. Her old bedroom became a temporary sanctuary as she navigated the wreckage of her marriage and finances. "I can look for an apartment," she offered repeatedly. "I don't want to impose." "Stay as long as you need to," I told her. "This has always been your home, too." Living under the same roof again after so many years apart had its challenges. We were two strong-willed women with established routines and habits, learning to coexist in a space that held different meanings for each of us. For me, it was the culmination of a lifetime of dreams and hard work. For Stephanie, it represented a simpler past she had spent years trying to escape. The legal fallout from the attempted house sale was significant. Marcus's real estate license was suspended pending an investigation by the state licensing board. The potential buyers dropped their lawsuit in exchange for a settlement that depleted what remained of Stephanie and Marcus's joint savings. Marcus filed for bankruptcy protection, leaving Stephanie to disentangle herself from the financial mess he had created. Through it all, I watched my daughter demonstrate a resilience I hadn't known she possessed. She spent hours on the phone with lawyers and creditors, methodically addressing each issue with a determination that reminded me strongly of Frank. In the evenings, exhausted from these battles, she would join me on the deck to watch the sunset, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in companionable silence. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Stephanie broached a subject we had both been avoiding. "Mom, I've been thinking about the house." She began, immediately raising my defenses until she continued, "Not about selling it, but about its place in our family's future." "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. Dad clearly wanted this place to remain in the family, she said. That's why he set up the trust the way he did. I'm wondering what your vision is for it long term. I considered her question, gazing out at the darkening horizon. I plan to live here as long as I'm able, I said finally. After that, I've always hoped it would remain a gathering place for the family, for you and Tyler, for your children someday. Stephanie nodded thoughtfully. I'd like that too, she said, surprising me. I've been thinking a lot about what's truly valuable these past weeks. This house, it's not just real estate, it's our history, our foundation. That's what your father always said, I told her, a lump forming in my throat. He called it our anchor in an uncertain world. He was right, Stephanie acknowledged. I lost sight of that somewhere along the way, got caught up in Marcus's world of property values and investment potential. We sat quietly for a while, the sound of waves filling the silence. Finally, Stephanie spoke again, her voice tentative. Would you consider updating the trust? She asked. Not to sell the house, she added quickly, seeing my expression, but to include me as a co-trustee with Tyler. I know I haven't earned it yet, but it would mean a lot to me to be part of preserving Dad's legacy rather than just a beneficiary. The request surprised me. A month ago, it would have seemed like another manipulation, another attempt to gain control of a valuable asset. Now, looking at the daughter who had spent weeks humbling herself, taking responsibility for her actions, and reconnecting with the values she had been raised with, it felt like something else entirely. A request for redemption, for inclusion in the family's future. I'll think about it. I promised, not yet ready to fully commit, but open to the possibility in a way I wouldn't have been before. Tyler flew in for a visit at the 1-month mark, his arrival creating both anticipation and anxiety in Stephanie. The siblings had spoken by phone several times since the failed house sale, but this would be their first face-to-face meeting. I watched from the kitchen window as Tyler's taxi pulled up and Stephanie went out to meet him. There was an awkward moment of hesitation before Tyler set down his bag and opened his arms. Stephanie stepped into his embrace, her shoulders shaking, with what I knew were sobs of relief and remorse. They stood there for a long minute, the ocean breeze ruffling their hair, two parts of my heart finding their way back to each other. That evening, the three of us sat around the dining table Frank had built by hand, sharing a meal, and tentatively rebuilding the bonds that had been strained to near breaking. Tyler was cautious but kind, listening to Stephanie's explanations without judgment, but also without naive acceptance. He had always been the mediator in the family, even as a child, able to see multiple perspectives while maintaining his own moral compass. I've been giving some thought to the house situation, Tyler said as we lingered over dessert. Specifically how we ensure it remains in the family long term. Stephanie tensed beside me, perhaps expecting recriminations or exclusion from these plans. Instead, Tyler continued with characteristic thoughtfulness. The trust Dad set up was a good start, but I think we need a more comprehensive plan for maintenance taxes and eventual transition. I'd like to establish a small family foundation funded initially from my savings to cover those costs in perpetuity. That's a generous offer, I said, touched by his commitment to preserving our home. It's not just generosity, Tyler explained. It's practicality. I live halfway around the world. Stephanie's nearby, but rebuilding her life. You're managing well now, Mom, but none of us knows what the future holds. Having a dedicated fund for the house removes financial pressure as a reason to ever sell it. I'd like to contribute too, Stephanie said quietly. Not now. Obviously, I'm in no position to at the moment. But once I'm back on my feet, I want to help maintain the place Dad loved so much. Tyler regarded his sister with an evaluating look, then nodded. I'd like that. This was never meant to be a burden for one person to carry alone. It should be a shared responsibility and a shared joy. The following week, we met with David Cohen to discuss these ideas. David, who had known our family for decades, seemed pleased by the constructive direction our conversations had taken. "Frank would approve," he said, as we finalized the paperwork for the expanded trust and maintenance foundation. He always said the house was meant to be a gathering place, not a source of division. Under the new arrangement, the house would remain in trust with both Tyler and Stephanie serving as co-trustees after my death. The newly established maintenance foundation would cover property taxes, insurance, and upkeep expenses in perpetuity, ensuring that financial pressures would never force a sale. Most importantly, the house could never be sold without unanimous agreement from all living adult descendants, a provision that would protect it from any future Marcus-like influences. As we left David's office, Stephanie linked her arm through mine, a gesture of affection she hadn't made in years. "Thank you for giving me a second chance," she said softly. "I don't deserve it, but I promise I won't waste it." "Second chances are what family is for," I told her, squeezing her arm. "Your father would be proud of how you're turning things around." The divorce from Marcus was finalized 6 months later. By then, Stephanie had found a job at a local marketing firm and moved into a modest apartment nearby. She came to dinner at the beach house every Sunday, sometimes bringing fresh flowers or ingredients for a special dish, small offerings that spoke of her continued commitment to rebuilding our relationship. Tyler visited twice that year, each time staying for at least 2 weeks, working remotely, so he could spend more time with us. During his Christmas visit, he brought his girlfriend, a marine biologist named Eliza, who delighted in exploring the tide pools with the same enthusiasm Tyler had shown as a child. 1 year after the failed attempt to sell the house, we gathered on the deck for a small celebration. Not of that painful episode, but of the healing that had followed it. Tyler and Eliza Stephanie, and her new friend Michael, a kind, unassuming teacher she had met through volunteer work, and me. As we raised our glasses in a toast, I looked around at the faces illuminated by the setting sun and felt Frank's presence among us. His wisdom vindicated his legacy secure. "To family," I said simply, "and to home." "To family and home." They echoed the words, carried away by the ocean breeze, becoming part of the countless memories embedded in the walls around us. Later that evening, as everyone else chatted inside, I stood alone on the deck watching stars emerge above the darkening water. "You were right, Frank," I whispered, "about everything. The house, the trust, the importance of planning ahead. Your foresight saved our family legacy." A particularly bright star seemed to twinkle in response, and I smiled, feeling connected to my late husband across the years and distance that separated us. The beach house would remain our family's anchor, a physical manifestation of Frank's love and wisdom for generations to come. 3 years have passed since that tumultuous time when my own daughter tried to sell my home out from under me. Looking back, I can see now that what initially felt like the worst betrayal of my life became unexpectedly the catalyst for healing and renewal within our family. Stephanie has transformed in ways I never could have imagined during those dark days. After rebuilding her career at the local marketing firm, she eventually started her own small agency, specializing in promoting sustainable businesses along the coast. The values Frank and I tried to instill in her as a child, integrity, hard work, respect for community, have resurfaced and now guide her professional life. She's been dating Michael, the high school science teacher, for over 2 years now. He's everything Marcus wasn't. Humble, authentic content with a modest lifestyle that prioritizes experiences over possessions. When they visit the beach house, which is often, Michael spends hours helping me maintain the garden Frank planted or fixing small issues around the property without being asked. He genuinely loves this place for what it is, not for what it might be worth. Tyler and Eliza married last summer in a simple ceremony on our beach. Tyler insisted there was no other place he could imagine beginning this new chapter of his life. They've settled in Australia, where both continue their marine research, but they visit for extended stays twice a year. During their last visit, they shared wonderful news. Eliza is expecting their first child, a boy they plan to name Franklin, in honor of his grandfather. As for me, I've found a new rhythm to my days. I still paint in the studio that once was Frank's office, but I've also started teaching art classes for local children twice a week. Watching young minds discover the joy of creating reminds me of Stephanie and Tyler at that age, forever arguing over who got to use the red paint first. The beach house itself seems to have taken on new life with the increased family presence. Rooms that stood empty for years now regularly fill with voices and laughter. The garden flourishes under the shared care of multiple hands. The maintenance foundation Tyler established ensures that no financial burden falls too heavily on any one person, allowing us all to enjoy the property without worry. Most significantly, the experience changed how I view wealth and inheritance. What Frank left us wasn't primarily financial, though the house's value continues to appreciate in this desirable coastal area. What he truly bequeathed was a foundation of values, a framework for family unity, and the foresight to protect both. The trust that saved our home from being sold has been updated again with provisions that extend to future generations. The beach house will pass from our hands eventually, but it will remain a gathering place for Turners for decades to come, a repository of family history and a sanctuary where new memories can form. Stephanie and I have had many long conversations about those difficult days. She's apologized countless times, each apology more genuine than the last, as she's gained perspective on how close she came to destroying something irreplaceable. I've long since forgiven her, recognizing that her actions, while inexcusable, came from a place of fear and manipulation rather than inherent selfishness. "I still can't believe how blind I was," she said recently, as we walked along the beach at sunset, valuing money over memories, status over family. "We all lose our way sometimes," I told her. "What matters is finding the path back." The irony isn't lost on me that Marcus, in his desperate attempt to solve his financial problems by selling our house, actually set in motion the events that would save it for generations. Had he not pushed Stephanie to such an extreme action, we might never have created the comprehensive protections that now ensure the property's future in our family. Last month, I received word that Marcus has moved to Florida and remarried, to a wealthy widow 20 years his senior. Some patterns, it seems, are difficult to break. Stephanie just shook her head when I shared the news, any lingering pain long since transformed into wisdom and relief at her narrow escape. As I sit on our deck this evening watching the familiar dance of light on water that has framed so many chapters of my life, I feel profound gratitude for second chances, for family resilience, and for Frank's enduring wisdom that continues to guide us. The beach house stands as it has for decades, weathered but strong, its cedar shingles silvered by salt air, its foundations firm against the changing tides. Like our family, it has weathered storms, adapted to change, and emerged more precious for having been nearly lost. If you've stayed with me through this story, perhaps you're wondering about your own family legacies, not just the material possessions that might pass from one generation to the next, but the values, the wisdom, the foresight that truly sustain a family through challenges. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to healing? How does your family preserve its important traditions and spaces? If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to hear more about life's unexpected lessons. Share this video with someone who might be struggling with family conflict, or considering how best to preserve what matters most. Remember that sometimes what appears to be an ending can actually be the beginning of something stronger and more beautiful than before. Thank you for listening to my story. May your own family find the wisdom to protect what truly matters, the courage to rebuild what's been damaged, and the grace to transform betrayal into blessing, just as we did with our beloved beach house by the sea.